of mine when I was in college. When I was in college at Brown University, and when I was an environmental studies major, I took this environmental philosophy course. We made this big, thick textbook of all these different articles, and one article that we read was written by this man named Lynn White in the 1960s, in which he basically blamed the Bible for the current environmental catastrophe that we have caused in the world. And he blamed this verse specifically. He said, this is the verse that is at the root of human selfishness and the human belief that we can do whatever we want in this world and to this world. And at the time, I was like 19 years old. I'm like, yeah, totally. That's the reason the Bible's at fault. Down with the Bible, right? This is before I got into my Jewish roots, right? And I remember this class that we had on that. Fast forward a few years, and I'm in Jerusalem. I'm getting more into my Jewish roots. I'm in the old city in Jerusalem, not too far from the Kotel, and I have this desire to start learning the weekly Torah portion. All right, but I don't. How do you do it? This is before phones and apps and computer websites and all that stuff. So I went into a Jewish bookstore and I bought 5 books of Moses in Hebrew and in English. I couldn't really, I didn't understand Hebrew at the time, so I was learning it in English. I'm like, great, I'm going to learn the Torah. It happened to be right after Simchat Torah, so we're starting the Torah reading all over again. So it was perfect timing. And I get to Genesis. And I get to this verse, and I had this memory of this professor telling us about this verse. How this is the reason why we have such an environmental catastrophe. I had this, wow, this is the verse. I remember learning this verse in class, right? Just hold out. Pause the story. We'll get back to it in a moment. This verse on the surface does look like that. It does look like it's giving humans permission to do whatever you want. Fill the earth and master it and have dominion over the world. It does look like that. But not everything is as it appears in Judaism. And we have layers of interpretation in Judaism, right? Let's look at some of the sources that basically help us to understand this better. Going into the Midrash, which is part of the oral Torah tradition, right? It says, when the Blessed Holy One created the first human, he took him and led him around all the trees of the Garden of Eden and said to him, look at my works, how beautiful and praiseworthy they are. And all that I have created, it was for you that I created it. So far, this Midrash, this teaching also looks like God made the world and gave it to us to do whatever we want. But wait, look what God says at the end. Pay attention that you do not corrupt and destroy my world. If you corrupt it, there's no one to repair it after you. Right? This midrash, this world teaching tells us, yes, God made humans like to be different kinds of beings on this planet. We are different. We have different capabilities. But with those different capabilities come a special responsibility, not to destroy the world, but to do the opposite, to take care of the world, to protect the world. Beavers and goats and all these other great creatures out there, they don't have the capability to protect the world. They're not harming the world like we are. But they can't protect the world like we can. We have the responsibility to protect the world. Not only not to destroy it, right, but to preserve it and to protect it for future generations. And we see that in a Jewish source. More recently, a couple of centuries ago in Germany, Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, one of the very famous rabbis of that time in Europe, he says so beautifully. He says the earth was not created as a gift to you. You have been given to the earth to treat it with respectful consideration as God's earth and everything on it as God's creation, as your fellow creature to be respected, loved, and helped to attain its purpose according to God's will. To this end, your heartstrings vibrate sympathetically with every cry of distress sounding anywhere in creation and with every glad sound uttered by a joyful creature. I mean, he sounds like a beatnik or like a hippie, right, in his writings. He was like a straight up like mainstream rabbi. Right? These are mainstream Jewish ideas that we are here to protect the earth. We are here to take care of creation and everything in it. This is Rabbi Hirsch, by the way. All right, one of the main thinkers of that time period in the 1800s in Europe. Another rabbi, not too long after, Rabbi Avram Yitzchak Cohen Cook, who became the first chief rabbi, right, of pre-state Israel. He died in 1935, so he didn't get to see the creation of the state. He wrote, or his student, he wrote a lot of different things. He just wrote in notebooks and filled up notebooks with his thoughts. His students then took those thoughts and put them into books according to similar themes. So his leading student created a pamphlet called The Vision of Vegetarianism and Peace, because Rabbi Cook was mostly vegetarian, right? At a time when like nobody was vegetarian, right? We're going to look at some of the sources. But he says about this, he says, there's no doubt in the mind of any enlightened thinker that the dominion, that word that we just saw spoken of in the Torah, cannot refer to the dominion of a tyrannical ruler who treats both subjects and servants cruelly in order to satisfy his personal arbitrary desires. It is unthinkable, Rav Kook says, that there should be an institution of servitude as ugly as this, right? Stamped with an eternal seal in the world of a God who is good to all, whose compassion extends to all creatures, and as it is said, a world built on love and kindness. Rav Kook is teaching us this word dominion might seem like one thing, but it's not. It's about protection. It's about having compassion. It's about seeing godliness everywhere and taking care of the world because of that. All right. This is Rav Kook, by the way, in the left. This is his leading student, Rabbi David Cohen, who put together these teachings into this pamphlet called A Vision of Vegetarianism and Peace. Okay. Let's go to the very next verse. Verse 129 in Genesis. Like the foundational verse when we're talking about Judaism and veganism. Because after verse 28, which might have seemed on the surface to tell humans, hey, it's your world, do whatever you want, the very next verse, right? God said, see, I give you every seed-bearing plant that is upon all the earth, and every tree that has seed-bearing fruit, they shall be yours for food. In this verse, God is giving humanity its diet, what you're allowed to eat. As you can see, there's no meat, there's no dairy, there's no eggs. It's fruit and plants. It's a purely plant-based diet that God gives. And if we were wondering if that's really what the verse says, so then the Talmud comes and makes it very clear. It says in the Talmud, Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rab, Adam, the first human being, was not permitted to eat meat, as it says, right, according to the verse we just saw. I remember when I got to this verse, and when I was in Jerusalem studying for the first time for the 5 books of Moses, I'm like, wait a minute, this is the very next verse. We didn't talk about this next verse in that class in college. We just talked about the one before it. How can we not go to the very next verse where you see that even though it might seem like God gives us like an empty slate, do whatever you want, the very next verse is already putting on the limitations, saying you can't do whatever you want in this world. In fact, you can't even touch the animals for food. Right? You can't kill animals for food. That was the original diet. In Judaism, in the Torah, it's in the black and white. It's very clear. It's not esoteric. Front and center, the first diet given by God to humanity was purely plant-based vegan. Okay? But then things change. It does say a few chapters later in 9:3, this is after the flood, after Noah comes out of the ark. It's a new world. It's a different world. Every creature that lives shall be yours to eat. As with the green grasses, I give you all these. Now God, this is diet 2.0. God is now allowing humanity to kill animals for food. Why the change? Why the shift? Well, let's remember. Why was there a flood in the first place? Because humanity became immoral and had a huge spiritual decline. And God wanted to start all over again. And God realized that humans were not on the same level that they were at the beginning. And therefore, they needed a different diet to kind of go in line with that lower level, basically. And it's not just me saying that. Pretty much anything I say today is not my words, it's the words of our sages, right? But let's just look at the next verse again. Even though they were given permission to eat animals, the very next verse once again comes with a limitation. You must not, however, eat flesh with its lifeblood in it. You're not allowed to eat the blood. Why? I'm allowed to eat the animal, but I can't eat the blood. Why? What's the difference? So here we have some sources that tell us why. Right, a more recent rabbi, Rabbi Moses Kasuto, who had a very well-known commentary on the Torah, he says apparently the Torah was in principle opposed to the eating of meat. When Noah and his descendants were permitted to eat meat, this was a concession, conditional on the prohibition of the blood. This prohibition implied respect for the principle of life and an allusion to the fact that in reality, all meat should have been prohibited. This partial prohibition of the blood was designed to call to mind the previously total one. Right? It's unbelievable, these sources that we have in our tradition. They're saying like meat eating, what is he saying here? The permission to eat meat after the flood was a concession by God. It's not the ideal, right? And then comes Rav, we'll get to it soon. Yeah, we'll get to it very soon. Was it there? Hold on, we'll get to it soon. All right. But basically saying it's a concession. It's not the ideal. The original diet, the plant-based diet, that was the ideal. But humans messed up. What was God to do, right? God was kind of following their lead, so to speak. Genesis 9:5, right? Then says kind of weirdly, right? Strangely, the very next verse, but for your own lifeblood, I will require a reckoning. whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For in his image did God make man. What's it saying? It's basically saying don't murder. So it goes from one verse that says you're allowed to eat animals to the next verse, but don't eat blood, don't eat its blood, to the very next verse saying, but don't kill human beings. As we say in Hebrew, my kids say all the time, ma kesher, like what's the connection? Right? Well, what's the connection? We see. Right? There's a very famous rabbi going back many centuries, right? Who said when God gave permission to Noah and his children to eat meat, he said, however, your blood, which belongs to your souls, I will demand. Because God was concerned that due to the cruelty and hostility that will be born in them as a result of eating meat, they will kill each other. God had to warn humanity after allowing them to eat animals not to kill each other, because the eating of the animal is going to now introduce into them, not to them, but into them, as a result of ingesting the meat for the first time ever, cruelty and hostility. And that might come out and be expressed in murder. So God had to warn them very carefully, but I'm allowing you to eat animals, but don't let that turn into killing each other. Right? Very, very powerful. Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, maybe some of you have heard of him. He was like the leader of the modern Orthodox movement in America. Okay, he died some decades ago. He wrote a lot, he taught a lot. This actually is from a book that was published after his death. So a lot of his students don't know this one. He said himself, he was like one of the leading Orthodox rabbis of the time. He said there is a distinct reluctance, almost an unwillingness on the part of the Torah to grant humans the privilege to consume meat. Humans as animal eaters looked at as ants by the Torah. He says there are definitive vegetarian tendencies in the Bible, but then he takes it a whole nother step. He says animal hunters and flesh eaters are people that lust. Of course, it is legalized, it was permitted, approved, yet it is classified in the Torah, in the Hebrew Bible. Eating meat is considered an act of ta'ava, which is lust. And he says that here. It's classified as ta'ava, lust, repulsive and brutish. In Judaism, we're supposed to run away from our ta'ava, run away from lust. And many times over in the Torah links eating meat with lust, right? Really kind of driving that point home that, yeah, it's permitted, but it's really not ideal. Try to stay away from it if you possibly can. A more modern day rabbi who's alive today and lives outside of Jerusalem, he wrote in his very, very monumental book of Jewish law that has sold like 1 million copies already, right? He's a leading legal Jewish law thinker in our generation. He said, although it is permissible to eat the flesh of animals, in several commandments, the Torah instructed us to act with mercy towards them. And in the process, directed us to pay attention to the moral problem of eating meat in order to prepare us for the time that will come in the future when we will stop eating meat. My friends, this is really, really important. We see in Judaism that humanity started not eating animals. And we see here, and this is based on other sources as well, his teacher, Rav Kook, who we just saw before, that the future also will go back to that original diet. There's a strong Jewish idea that we will return to the original diet. Why? Because eating animals was never ideal. It was a concession because of the spiritual and moral fall of humanity. Okay? I'm going to skip through some things here just because we have so many other things. I'm just going to say this one and then we'll skip a little bit more. This is from Rav Kook, the first chief rabbi who I mentioned before. He says, along these very same lines, he says very powerfully, is it possible to conceive that a highly valued moral virtue, which was the first original plant-based diet, which had already existed as part of the human legacy, should be lost forever? It was already established from the point of view of the intellectual prompting that was of spiritual phrase he used a lot, which is hidden in the depths of Torah. What he's wanting to say is that the very same permission to eat meat, granted after the flood and the generation of Noah, was not intended to be the actual practice for all time. For how is it possible for a lofty and enlightened moral condition, the original vegan diet, once instituted, to vanish as though it had never been? Rav Kook is convinced, without a doubt, that in the future, we Jews and in all of humanity will return to the original diet because that is the most aligned with the original vision that God had for the world. Okay? There's so many sources here. Okay, I'm going to move forward a little bit because time is flying. All right. But there's so many great teachings. I do want to move to other things and give you guys time to ask questions as well. All right. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Baal Tashrit. How are we doing with time, Jacob? How much more time before we go to questions?
I would say probably another 20 minutes max before we can open it up.
Then I'm going to go back just a little bit. I'm going to go back. Okay, I'm glad I asked. Okay, there's this very interesting mitzvah in the Torah. All right, that has to do with non-domesticated animals that are kosher. That if you kill them, you have to pour out its blood onto the earth and cover it with the earth. It's called kisui adam, covering the blood. It seems kind of like where that come from. It seems kind of like old school, ancient pagan a little bit even, but it's a mitzvah, right? It says in Leviticus, if any Israelite or any stranger who resides among them hunts down an animal or a bird that may be eaten, a kosher, non-domesticated animal, he shall pour out its blood and cover it with earth. Rav Kook again comes and says something very powerful on this. Rav Kook says this: covering the blood of the beast and fowl is a kind of divine protest against the permission to eat meat, which is fundamentally conditional upon the corrupt state of the human soul, like we said before. The Torah, however, declares, cover the blood, hide your shame and your moral weakness. He's basically saying that the act of covering the blood is like covering our shame for what we just did. What did we just do? We killed an animal for food. Even though humanity has not yet reached the level which it is capable of reaching, of understanding that one should not take the life of any living sentient being out of necessity or craving. Rav Kook was of the opinion that we shouldn't kill animals out of necessity or craving, that we should overcome these feelings and basically eat a diet that doesn't require us to kill animals. He himself, as I said before, was a vegetarian. All right, way before his times. He was a vegetarian in like 1890s, or 1910, right? But he saw this. He saw what the Torah is talking about, and he realized that this is the ideal way of eating, right? And so he brought it into his life. And his leading student who put together these teachings, he himself was a vegetarian, possibly a vegan as well. Again, way before anybody else was really doing this. All right, now I'll skip forward a little bit. Okay. Talking about Baal Tashrit. Right, we're talking about that before. Right, this mitzvah from the Torah, this commandment from the Torah, not to destroy resources. All right. As I said before, right, we know that today in our modern day times, a meat-based or an animal-based diet uses way more water, land, grain, and resources in general than a plant-based diet. It's been proven, it's there, it's a known fact. So if we're presented with the choice between this kind of diet or that kind of diet, and one diet uses less resources than the other, it seems to me that we should choose the less intensive one, right? That still gives us our protein, our calories, our energy, right? Because it's in line with this teaching from the Torah that we should live lives that are sensitive to the amount of resources that we're using, okay? Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who was the former chief rabbi of England, who died a few years ago, he himself was a vegetarian as well. All right. He quotes Vaclav Havel, right? I can't see all the words because there's something on my screen right now, but he says he made a fundamental point in The Art of the Impossible, a book, where he writes, I believe that we have little chance of averting an environmental catastrophe unless we recognize, and these are powerful words, unless we recognize that we are not the masters of being, but only a part of being. And then Rabbi Sachs gives a commentary on that. He says, what does that mean? That is why a religious vision is so important, reminding us that we are not owners of our resources. They belong not to us, but to the eternal and to eternity, to God and to the future. Hence, we may not needlessly destroy. If that applies even in war, and that's where it comes from, the mitzvah of not destroying resources unnecessarily comes from a passage in the Torah that talks about war. If that applies even in war, that we shouldn't destroy unnecessarily, how much more so in times of peace? The earth is the Lord's and all that is in it, it says in the book of Psalms. And Rabbi Sachs ends this passage by saying, we are its guardians on behalf of its creator for the sake of future generations. Going back to the teaching we said before. Human beings have been given a special place in creation with a special responsibility. It's a Jewish value. It's not like, a tree hugging value. if you're like a hippie and you like to like hug trees. No, it's a Jewish value to care about the earth. It's a Jewish value, and we see it in our sources, in our teachings, in our laws. We have an obligation. It's not just like a good idea. It's not just a suggestion. It's an obligation in Judaism not to destroy resources unnecessarily, not to abuse, not to overuse, not to use in the wrong way. Of course we can use. Of course I can cut down a tree and use it for paper and to build a house. Of course, right? But I have to think about, am I overusing? Am I abusing? Am I using too much? Is there a way I can use less? That's the Jewish way of thinking, right? It says in the Talmud, going back 1,500 years, if not more, one who covers an oil lamp, causing its flame to burn inefficiently, or uncovers a kerosene lamp, allowing the fuel to evaporate faster, violates the prohibition about tashchit. If you're using, back in the day, it was oil and kerosene, right? If you're using your fuel resources inefficiently, you're breaking the law from the Torah. Just kind of transpose that to modern day times. What if we leave our lights on, right? Or, just do things that are using, more energy than we need to. That's going against the prohibition of Bat Hashchit in a modern day context. There's another example from the Talmud. Rav Chisda said, if one eats barley but is able to eat wheat, he has broken the rule of Bat Hashchit. Right? Wheat is less intensive to grow. Barley, more so. If you're eating something that takes more resources than something else, when you could have eaten that something else, the Talmud says this. It's not me, right? It's the Talmud says this, that you just broke Baal Tashchit, right? Again, transpose that to our modern day times. If I have a choice between a cow burger and a plant-based burger, and the cow burger took 10 times as much water and resources and land and all that than the plant-based burger, I have to think about, what would Judaism say? What would Jewish law say? What's the correct thing to do here, right? When it comes to this law, Baal Tashchit, right? Maimonides, one of the greatest thinkers of all time, of all Jewish history, going back 800, 900 years, in his monumental work of Jewish law, says not only one who cuts down a fruit tree, again, that was the original context of this law, Baal Tashchit, of not destroying resources, was not cutting down fruit trees in a time of war, but he expands it, or he just shows us how it goes beyond fruit trees. He says not only one who cuts down a fruit tree, right? But anyone who destroys household goods, tears clothing, demolishes a building, stops up a spring, or ruins food deliberately, violates the prohibition of Baal Tashchit. It's a very serious law in Judaism, not to waste, right? We hear from our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents' generation, eat all your food, don't waste the food. That's like a Jewish idea. I know it's also other reasons why our grandparents told us that, but it's also rooted in this tradition of not wasting. That there's, if it has a use, don't let it go to waste. Don't take too much. Make sure there's enough for the next generation. Make sure you're leaving this world at the very least as good as it was handed to you, if not better. Right? There's a teaching in the Talmud that I don't have here in this presentation, but it says, "Who is the wise person? Who is the wise person? The person who sees the person who sees the consequences of his or her actions." Right? What I do today ripples into the future. What I do today, right, creates the world of the future for my kids, their kids, their kids, and their kids. Right? Seriously. So how am I acting today? What kind of choices am I making today? And are they going to make a better world or less good world for the generations to come? Right? Again, a very, very Jewish idea. Just some of the statistics, right? You can find more of this online, just threw in a couple of them. But when it comes to water, okay, it takes more than 2,400 gallons of water. I know it sounds crazy and impossible, but it is, right? The meat industry is intensively using water. It takes more than 2,400 gallons of water to produce 1 pound of meat, as opposed to 1 pound of wheat takes 25 gallons, right? So much of the grain that we're growing is going to animals instead of humans. There's people starving all over the world, yet we have enough grain to feed. Do you know how many animals are killed every single year for food? I know we can't really talk right now back and forth, but just think in your head a number. How many animals are killed every year for food? Try to think of a number. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. On average, the average year, 70, 80 billion land animals are killed for food. My friends, we're like, what, 9 million? I don't know the exact number of humans on the planet, 9 million or so. We have enough food to feed 80 billion animals every single year, but we don't have enough food to feed all the humans. What's going on? There's something broken with our food system. And one of the things that's broken is where we're putting our energy, where we're putting our resources. We could be eating a much simpler diet, a much less intensive diet that still gives us, again, everything we need, all the calories, all the protein, all the carb, all the energy. But we're choosing a different way that is literally destroying the world. It's destroying the world, and it's causing people to be hungry. All right. I know I'm saying like big things right now. This needs time to break these things down and like process them, but we don't have a lot of time. So I'm saying them quickly. Right. Take milk. Right. Just look at this chart. Right. Dairy milk versus plant-based milk when it comes to pollution, emissions, land use, and water use. Look at it. The chart speaks for itself. Right. Dairy milk is more intensive than every alternative kind of milk out there: rice, soy, oat, and almond. Okay. What would Judaism say about that? Right? If these are the figures, or if these are the facts, and I'm Jewish and I care about my Jewish values and Jewish teachings and Jewish law, what am I supposed to choose? Is it so important that I have cow milk in my coffee? Is it so important that I have cow milk in my cereal when I can very easily have a plant-based milk that tastes just as good? I mean, to me, maybe not just as good, but it's fine. Okay, so it's not the same exact taste, but it's way better for the world. What would Judaism care about? That I get the few seconds of a certain taste on my tongue, or that I do something better for the world? Which would Judaism rather me choose? A fleeting taste, right? Or something that's better for the world? I think it's pretty obvious, right? I'm just going to keep going. I know this sounds crazy also, but look at this. An average family of 4 uses about 400 gallons of water. Okay? That's a day, I think. Okay? I know cheeseburgers, we're doing a Jewish talk here, but this is the image that I found. Not the best image, but still, right? Add 4 cheeseburgers to that, and that goes up to 7,000 gallons. That's how much the meat and dairy industry are intensive in terms of its water use and use of other resources. All right, let's go to the mitzvah tzar b'chayim, not causing unnecessary pain and suffering. We only have a few more minutes before questions. We have so many beautiful and powerful teachings in our tradition that tell us don't cause unnecessary pain and suffering to animals. Let's look at a few of them. In the Gemara, it just makes very clear in the Gemara, in the Talmud, from the statements of both of these sages, it can be learned that Tzar B'Chayim is by Torah law. Just in case you had a doubt, is not causing pain and suffering to animals a Torah law? It is. The Gemara, the Talmud says it very clearly. Let's go to some other sources. About 500 years ago, there's a very, very well-known rabbi named Rabbi Moshe Cordovero. He was a big leading Kabbalist of Tzfat, which was like the center of Kabbalah back then. And he writes in his teachings, one should respect all creatures, recognizing in them the greatness of the Creator. All creatures, he said, are imbued with the Creator's wisdom, which itself makes them greatly deserving of honor. The maker of all, the wise one, God, who transcends everything, is associated with all his creatures in having created them. Now, here's the kicker. If one were to disparage them, the animals, God forbid, this would reflect upon the honor of their maker. Someone could be all super religious, all Jewish, all like following the Jewish laws, and does things, makes choices that harm animals unnecessarily. He's basically showing disrespect to God through those actions. Disrespect of creatures is disrespect of the Creator of those creatures, right? By a leading Jewish rabbi from 500 years ago in Israel. He says in another part of the same book, one's compassion should extend to all creatures, and he should not disparage or destroy them, for the divine wisdom extends to all creation. For this reason, our sages warned us not to treat food disrespectfully. Just as divine wisdom despises nothing, so should a person show compassion to all of God's works. Let's just take that in and look at the next few images. I know they're intense. I know they're hard. If you need to look away, right? Whatever you need to do. The next few images are the factory farming world today. What we're doing to animals today, so that we have chicken on Friday night, so we have, steak, brisket on Rosh Hashanah, and hamburgers during the week. These are the things that we human beings are doing to animals today, just so that we can have a certain taste on our tongues for a few fleeting moments. Just look at it. I'm not going to talk as we go through these next few slides. I know we don't eat pig, but still pigs suffer more than any other animal in the industry. I said I wasn't going to talk, but I have to explain. This is a dairy calf being taken from its mother right after birth. The dairy industry, including kosher dairy, removes the calf immediately after birth, causing incredible physical and emotional pain to the animals. This is the way the dairy industry works today. And then it lives in this little plastic shelter, never seeing its mother again after birth, and the mother never sees it. This happens multiple times a day to cows in the dairy industry. Now, I don't know if anyone knows what's happening here. Right? I would never show the next. Oh, I wouldn't show the second after this, the picture. It's too gruesome. All right, but this is the egg industry. These are the hatcheries. This happens in all the hatcheries, whether the eggs are going and being sold as regular eggs or as organic free-range eggs. It all comes from the same hatcheries, right? Different chickens are bred for meat or for eggs. Any chick that is born male in the egg hatcheries can make eggs. It's useless to them. And they can't be used for meat because they're not bred for that. They won't make enough meat to make it profitable enough. So all male chicks immediately after birth are killed. They're either put into large bags and suffocated to death, or they're put on this conveyor belt. In a half a second, these chicks are going to fall onto a huge blade that spins around and cuts them up. And that's how they die. And this happens every day in the egg industry. Whether you're buying organic or free range or not, they all come from the same place. For me is one of the hardest things to see. I know I said I wasn't going to talk, but I'm a Jew, so I have to talk, right? Like this is what God wants from us. This is what our Jewish tradition wants from us. Like Judaism would put a yeah, you're doing it right. That's exactly what God intended. To chop up male chicks on the first day of their birth, millions of them. Millions and tens of millions, hundreds of millions every year. Right? In nature, chickens.
Akiva,
Yeah.
Akiva, let's I think we got the point. Let's open it up for questions. And then if we have time and anybody wants to stick around, we can continue with the gruesome photos.
Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing now and give it over to all of you. Feel free to ask any questions you want.
Questions. Let's open it up. Ask anything you want to. If you don't, I've got some questions, but by all means, go ahead.
I have some friends.
Come on closer so we can hear you, please.
I already have some friends who are either vegetarian or vegan, and they haven't put the connection together. Are there any books that you know of that can be shared that would make this point?
Okay, books that, can you hear that? Did you hear that, Rabbi?
Yeah. So first of all, you can visit my Instagram page. I put a lot of teachings on that highlight that connection, Vegan Rabbi on Instagram or Facebook. But books, there's a great book. There's a man named Richard Schwartz. Richard Schwartz, a nice Jewish name. He now lives in Israel. He's originally from Staten Island. And he's kind of like the grandfather of the Jewish vegan movement. I know him personally. He's written a number of books, but probably his most on topic. One is something called Judaism and Vegetarianism. Today, he would have entitled it Judaism and Veganism. But look up Richard Schwartz. He has a lot of books that give over that argument very clearly and very well.
Okay, good. And anybody else? So I've got a couple of questions for you. And maybe that will trigger other people. So, if we move to a vegan lifestyle, we have to change our eating habits, which is something that is sort of associated with being Jewish. on Rosh Hashanah we eat meat, or on Friday night we eat chicken. On Passover we eat another animal. It's part of it's what our parents ate. It's part of our tradition. How do we justify all that, and how do we deal with that?
It's a very, very good question. I grew up even though I didn't grow up in a religious family, I grew up in a very Jewish cultural family. My grandparents and my mother's side were from Poland. There were a lot of survivors from the war. I heard a lot of Yiddish. We had all the traditional foods on the holidays, right? The gefilte fish, the brisket, all that kind of stuff. But it's important to remember, like, the times have changed. Times have radically changed. And Judaism expects that we will apply Jewish teachings and values to changing times. I remember sitting with my grandmother once. She died when she was 98 years old. She grew up in a shtetl in Poland, and I asked her, I was already vegan at the time. I asked her, like, did you guys eat veal when you were in Poland? She's like, of course. I'm like, how'd you get veal? She's like, well, we just went to the fields and took the youngest calf that was there and shechted it, and that was the veal. And I realized in that moment that she would have no idea that the veal she's eating today comes from a baby calf that's put in a wooden pen immediately after birth, never to leave, never to go outside, never to run outside in nature, grows quickly, too big for the pen and can't even turn around, just so that it doesn't develop muscle, right? And the flesh stays white, right? She would never imagine that that's what we do today. Right? So the world has radically changed. All these traditional foods that we eat, the chicken soup and all that, very nice, very nostalgic, right? But they're customs. They're customs. We're talking about laws here now. The laws of not causing unnecessary pain and suffering to animals. The laws of not wasting resources unnecessarily. Laws, right, override customs in Judaism. It's a very nice custom, chicken soup for hundreds of years. But I'm sorry. Right? If a chicken, like you saw the picture I put up before, is living its entire life in a cage with other chickens and they're, pecking each other to death, so much so that the farmers burn off their beaks when they're born, right? Is that Jewish? Is that chicken soup Jewish anymore? And we're talking about values? No. So we have to change our ways. So I have a different soup. I love soup. There's like a million kinds of soup that I can eat and I do eat. And I love Shabbos no less than someone who eats chicken soup, right? And I do believe that my soup that I eat on my Shabbos table, right, is more aligned with Jewish values than the chicken soup that other people eat.
Yes.
So how does Judaism, maybe there are many examples of this, but how does Judaism reconcile this law not to cause unnecessary pain and suffering to an animal within all these laws of kashrut, which talk about, is that just a matter of like timing? Because you were saying we were supposed to be vegan, then we were given a concession, and obviously today we should be thoughtful about it, but the timing of the law you mentioned of unnecessary pain and suffering, and the fact that Judaism as a whole doesn't support animal rights. Right, so.
That it does support animal rights, you mean?
No, sorry, the teachings do, but the people don't as a whole,
Okay.
right? I mean, I'm vegan, I fully believe we should, but it's, how do we reconcile? Is this just like a lack of, this is a little known law, or we ignore it, or it's hypocritical, or like, how do we reconcile that?
It's a great question. We need a whole nother hour just to talk about that. But I'll say, like, literally, really quickly, like in a minute. You can time me. Hopefully I won't go over a minute. First of all, if you look at the laws of kashrut, right? First of all, we have to remember that the laws of kashrut are not obligatory. They're only if you choose to eat animals, right? So if you choose to eat animals, then you have to go through all of these laws. And if you don't have to do it. My kitchen, which is right over there, is very simple, right? It's very easy. Okay. So I don't have to do all those laws. Those laws are only in the if category. If you do now think about it. If you do eat animals, now there's only certain kinds of animals you can eat. You have to be thoughtful. You have to be very careful. You have to be aware of what animals you're eating. And then the shechting process, the slaughter process, let's put veganism aside for a second. The way that animals are killed, ideally, the way they used to be, not anymore, but the way they used to be killed was in a very thoughtful way. The shochet, the ritual slaughterer, stood there with a knife right next to the animal and slit its throat. Why? Because Judaism wants us to be very aware of what we're doing when we're taking another life to feed ourselves. You have to be right there. And even in our modern day world where there's all these different ways that you can kill an animal, you can put a screw to its head, you can electrocute it, you can do things that maybe will cause less pain to the animal, still Jewish law requires that happens in the old school kind of way with the shochet and the knife. Why? Don't forget what you're doing. Don't forget that you're taking a sentient being's life for your own. Yes, be aware of that. Now, today, unfortunately, in the modern day, modernized factory farming world, the shochet, the ritual slaughter, is literally killing 3 chickens a minute and like one cow a minute. That never happened before in Jewish history. There's a story of the Baal Shem Tov. If anyone's ever heard of the Baal Shem Tov, he was the founder of the Hasidic movement. Before it became, really well known, he was kind of hiding himself, from people. He was a shochet. And they say that he would sit with an animal for an entire day, talking with it, crying with it before he took its life. That's how much he realized what he was doing. So it doesn't mean that everyone has to do that. That's, but still, like 3 chickens a minute, a cow a minute. Are we supposed to be automaton? Just keep killing, keep killing, keep killing, keep killing? No, like we've lost the sensitivity that the laws of kashrut were meant to have, right, in our modernized world. So, yeah, they're meant to be followed if. And to more on point answer your question, I know I went over a minute, but basically, I think people just don't think about it. People are not being aware. They're not caring enough. I'll be straight up, right? Like the rabbi says it's kosher, I'll eat it. Is it really kosher? I don't know.
Any other questions?
Feel free to challenge me.
Maybe I'll challenge.
Go ahead.
Many, you can interpret it from the Torah many times, anything as you like, and there are too many interpretations. My question is, on all the things that you read, what is written in the Torah, and is there some other rabbi that interpreted it in opposite way, that is a mitzvah to eat meat, or you should eat meat? If there are other rabbis interpreted opposite?
It's a great question. It's a really good question. Again, that's a whole nother topic. And you're right, Jews were masters of interpretation, right? And you can have the same verse and have multiple interpretations. So you're totally right about that. Every single source I brought here was from a well-recognized, mainstream, big rabbi. Every source I brought, okay? I have not come across one single source, and if anyone does, you can send it to me, that says it's a mitzvah to have a hamburger Tuesday night dinner. Okay? Or it's a mitzvah to have eggs on Friday morning. You're allowed to, but there's no mitzvah to that. Let me give a little bit more context. In Jewish history, we're around for over 3,000 years. The only time it was a mitzvah, meaning an obligation to eat meat in Judaism, is when there was a temple that stood in Jerusalem. We had sacrifices. There were certain sacrifices that needed to be eaten either by the Kohanim, the priests who worked in the temple, or by the person bringing it. Okay? Your average Jew, that happened maybe a few times a year, and the little piece of meat you got looked nothing like what people eat today at a normal Tuesday night dinner. Okay, that was the only time in history of the Jewish people that it was a mitzvah to eat meat. Korban Pesach, Erev Pesach, right? The afternoon before Pesach, every Jew had to bring a Paschal lamb and then eat it at the end of the Seder. And so people like to ask me, Akiva, if the temple comes back tomorrow and there's the Paschal offering, you're a vegan and you're an Orthodox Jew, are you going to eat from that sacrifice? And I say yes, I will, because then it actually is an obligation. I'll be honest with you, I don't think in the future temple, which, Judaism believes will come one day, I don't believe we're going to have animal sacrifices ever again. Right? And there are sources that support that idea, but that's a whole nother topic. But and I'll just say this one last thing to answer your question. The only time it was a mitzvah to eat meat, all right, in the temple was on Yom Tov, was on the Chagim, was on the holidays, Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot. Because then certain sacrifices were brought that every single person had to eat a little piece of meat from. Besides that, there was never an obligation. Today, 2,000 years after the temple was destroyed, there's no more mitzvah, there's no more obligation. Right? You're allowed to, but it's not an obligation.
Yes.
I don't know if this is directly about this talk, but I'm curious. What is being described, it goes beyond, like, we're a Reform temple. it goes beyond, who we are as Jews, like Orthodox, conservative, reform. Who else are you speaking to? Who else is listening to you out there in the Jewish world? Can you tell us?
I love your questions, by the way. You guys are awesome, really. Thank you. I feel, look, I grew up non-religious, right? I grew up in the conservative movement. In my town, there was 2 temples. There were 2 synagogues, Reform and Conservative. Half my friends were in the Reform, half of my friends were in the Conservative, right? I became Orthodox later on in life. But in my educational work for over 25 years, most of my work has been with non-religious, like non-Orthodox Jews, right? Okay, so thank God, and I love that. So I just through my work itself, I've been connected to Orthodox, Reform, Conservative, Reconstructionist, Renewal, every kind of Jew out there, non-connected, right? And I love that. I love that. I like being connected to all different kinds of people. In terms of my vegan rabbi work, it's the same thing, right? I'm connected to Orthodox Jews, to Reform, Conservative, every single kind of Jew, right? And usually, what happens is in the Orthodox world, there's very few Orthodox vegans out there. All right. It's more about showing them how Judaism supports veganism. And in the non-Orthodox world, it usually is more about like, oh, they're already kind of open to these ideas and showing like the Jewish connection, to like ideas that they already have heard and agree with, or maybe even applied to their lives. That's a little bit of an overgeneralization, but that's what it usually kind of comes to. But yeah, thank God through my vegan rabbi work, I'm in touch with all kinds of Jews. And I love it.
Yes,
Maybe one more question.
absolutely.
I did hear the word fish in all your discussion. It's also
You did or did not?
Did
I
not.
did not.
Oh, I said it once.
Maybe I didn't
That's
hear
okay.
it correctly.
That's okay, though. That's okay. I might have been talking too fast.
Maybe you can talk more a little bit about fish,
Yes,
Great, 100%. Can I ask you where your accent is from? I love your accent.
Israeli.
Israeli.
That's what I thought. Okay, so Tov. So fish, right? You think of all the different kind of animal foods out there. What's the problem with fish, right? Unfortunately, humans in our modern day world have figured out a way to mess up the ecosystems of fish, right? Why? How? We have literally overfished the oceans. I mean, something that just a couple generations ago, humans never could have possibly thought was even possible, but we have. With our huge, massive nets and our, industrialized fishing industry, we literally have overfished the oceans to a point where we have actually changed the ecosystems, right? You know what people talk about, like plastic in the ocean? Most of that is from the fishing industry. So we have literally done in the oceans. There's a documentary out there called Seaspiracy, SEA-spiracy. It's all about the horrible negative impacts of the fishing industry today. We have caused unrepairable damage to species, to ecosystems, to the waters, to the cleanliness of the water, and that's all because of eating fish. Right? So it seems like fish is like the most like gentle, the most like, non-problematic. Unfortunately, it's one of the worst things happening today. All right, but what happens is the industries do a great job of like putting happy cow pictures on their cartons of milk, and on the tuna, a cartoon of a fish, standing on its tail, and we think it's all cute and nice, but it's not. It's not cute and it's not nice. It's absolutely abhorrent and horrible and causing untold suffering and untold destruction to the world, right? But the marketing teams of these corporate, industries have done a great job of hiding the truth from people. But over the years, more and more documentaries have come out. You can find them very easily. You can watch them yourself. Dominion is one of them as well. Dominion and Seaspiracy are the two I'd recommend highly to really see the insides of these industries.
What does that have to do with peace? Didn't you ask about peace?
No, you asked about fish.
Okay,
Fish. He asked about fish.
Fish in the sea, yes.
it's almost the same.
So I have another question. Shavuot is a dairy holiday. How do you justify Shavuot when the dairy all comes from factory farms?
Great question again. And again, here we see eating dairy on Shavuot is a custom. There's no
Right.
obligation. You can take 10,000 rabbis from every denomination, and not one of them will tell you it's an obligation to eat dairy on Shavuot. All right, it is a custom that started at some point in the Jewish people's history. It's a cute custom, cheesecake, all that kind of stuff. It was a cuter custom when things used to be more family owned and small and, you know, at a little villages, and is no longer cute. Right? Eating cheesecake on Shavuot is no longer cute in our modernized, industrialized, globalized dairy industry. Every bite of cheesecake, right, comes to you as a result of causing unbelievable physical and emotional pain to cows and to calves. So for me, I'm going to celebrate Shavuot, which is like the Jewish holiday, like the start of Judaism, like the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai, celebrating the beginning of our people becoming our people by eating foods that caused incredible pain to God's creatures. That makes no sense to me. There's other things I could eat.
Good. Good. Any other questions? This is your chance, folks. So since no other question, I have another one, so we have a few more minutes. We have the 613 mitzvot. How does veganism or the three that you mentioned, the Tzar Balei Chaim, the Shomer HaGuf, and the Al Tashchit, come into the 613 mitzvot?
Right, so those are three mitzvot of this of the 613 that I believe are being unrecognized or not recognized enough in our generation, even ignored. So by making food choices with those laws in mind, we're fulfilling those laws as opposed to breaking those laws by making different kinds of food choices. Right? So, you know, we have a choice, right? We have a choice. Right? We have choices every day in all different kinds of ways of what we're going to do and how we're going to be. We have to know, and Judaism is very, very, you know, specific about reminding us is that there's consequences to our choices, right? Both physically and spiritually. And Judaism believes that we're here to build a world that's better than what was yesterday. Tikkun olam, right? L'tekenet olam, to fix the world, to heal the world. I can't think of anything we do on a daily basis more than the food choices we make that have such a far-reaching impact on the world, both our health, the health of other humans, the welfare of animals, the state of the environment. Every single time we decide what we're going to eat, what we're going to buy at the store, we are literally affecting in the entire world, right? And so it's through our food choices that we could, I believe, best participate in the process of tikkun olam, of fixing this world, because of the way that the world has radically changed. Right? Let's be honest. Like 200 years ago, there were no vegans in the world, really. You know, because they didn't have to be, because all of these things that we just talked about didn't exist. Now they do. Sorry to say, they do, right? And we need to deal with it, and we need to respond to it, and we need to be aware of it. That's what Judaism is all about: living lives that are with awareness, right, and responsibility. It's a new world. Welcome to the new world. We need new choices now. We need new food choices specifically in order to maintain the values of our Jewish tradition.
Yes.
I hope this question isn't too ignorant. Is there less openness in the Orthodox movement because of the focus on tradition and custom to veganism? Is there less openness, would you say, because of, yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
So not
Absolutely.
but just because of the focus on tradition.
Oh, it's a great question and a great thing to bring up. All the time, I'm like the only vegan at a meal, at a kiddush. I just was with 50 people for the meals for Rosh Hashanah, and I was one of two vegans, and there was tons and tons of meat, right? So you're absolutely right. In the Orthodox world, because of that, and there is this like idea, they believe that it's a bit complicated, but there is this opinion, idea, whatever, that you should eat meat on the holidays: Rosh Hashanah, Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot. But I study these things, even the opinions that say, you know, it's a mitzvah they say still it's not an obligation, which I know is kind of confusing because we usually think of the word mitzvah as an obligation, but they're using the word mitzvah in a different way, right? There's just simply no obligation. There's no obligation today, especially if it's going against these laws that we already talked about. But you're right. There's less openness in the Orthodox world, and that's one of my missions.
There was another question there?
I just had a comment. Talking about industrialized farming. Here in our area, we have access to neighborhood farmers in the hills. You can get your eggs from a neighbor. You can sometimes get goat milk from a friend. I know that doesn't answer a global question, but is that reason, personally, I would go to the whole nother subject, which we're not touching today, which is personal health and what the ramifications are of eating those products. But as far as Jewish law, would that then be considered okay?
Another great question. And if we had more time, excuse me, if we had more time, we would have touched on the personal health aspect of it, which is very, very important. But we don't have time for that. But there are many sources about protecting our health in Judaism, and we know it's been proven by modern research that it doesn't mean if you eat meat you're going to be sick. It doesn't mean that, but it does. In general, the more animal products in someone's diet, in general, on average, the less healthy somebody is, right? But anyway, to more directly answer your question, for sure, if someone is getting their eggs from someone who has chickens running around their backyard or goats running in their field, or animals that live not in factory farm conditions, of course that's way better. Of course that's way better. You're doing something way, way better. If someone said, I'm never going to buy a meat product again from the factory farming world, yes, they are doing something way better and something way more aligned with Jewish values. But globally, even nationally, even, more locally speaking, that's less than 1% of the people doing that. Way less than 1%. Right? So it's nice, but it's just, we're beyond the point of return, and so I believe that the best choice for people to make is just to stop supporting these industries altogether. And I will say, and again, I say this with total respect, right? And I think I'm really glad that you brought up what you brought up. But even the eggs, even the nicer eggs, they still came from hatcheries that killed half the chicks that were born every single day, the male chicks. Even the nice eggs, even your neighbor, where do they get their chickens from? They got their chickens from hatcheries. Those hatcheries killed all the male chicks on the day of their birth. And the milk, how do they have the milk to give you or to sell to you? Because they took the babies away from their mothers the first day of their birth. Right? Unless you can find a farm that doesn't do that shares the milk with the baby and the customer, it's still practicing those same practices just on a smaller scale.
So we spend a lot of time on animals. We spend a lot of time on the earth. Can we spend 5 minutes before we wrap up on personal health? Because I think that the third leg of the stool is the food that we consume today is actually killing us. And how does that fit with Judaism?
So great, right? There are many, many sources in Judaism and the Torah that have to do with the mitzvah of guarding our health. Like I said before at the very beginning, there's many teachings in the Talmud and over the centuries, different law books, different teachers, different rabbis that talk about the importance of taking care of our health. And we know, look, again, like I said before, I grew up eating tons of meat, tons of white bread, and tons of sugar. It was very, very unhealthy, right? That's not aligned with Jewish law, okay? Nobody told me that. I didn't know that. It tasted good. I didn't care, let's be honest, but still, okay? I met a doctor in Atlanta, Georgia, my speaking tour a couple of years ago, who he became vegan about 15 years ago because he had a heart attack. And he ate a very meat-heavy diet, and he did all the research. He was a very smart guy. And he's like, how am I going to, his father died of a heart attack. He's like, I don't want to die young like my dad did, right? And he did all the research, and he's like, what's the best diet for me going forward? He didn't know anything about veganism. He didn't know any of this stuff. He did all the research, and he found that the plant-based diet. Forget the word vegan. I know vegan is like a loaded word today. A plant-based diet is the healthiest way to go, right? And we have a mitzvah, we have a commandment, we have a value of taking care of our health, right? I don't need to eat animals to be healthy. I don't need to eat animals to be strong. For all those athletes out there and, Olympic athletes, the Olympians out there, there's this amazing documentary called
Game changer.
Game Changers. Great, right. That talks about all these Olympic level athletes who went plant-based because it improved their performance, right? Look, if Adam and Eve can do it, we could too, right? I say that half jokingly, but also half seriously. The Jewish value is to be healthy, right? Not to eat animals.
Yep.
It's not a Jewish value to eat animals. Okay. Now, yes, for hundreds of years, thousands of years, you could eat animals and not go against all these laws because of the way the world was back then. Like I said before, it's not that way anymore. Right. And now people eat way more. Again, going back to my grandmother who grew up in a shtetl in Poland, I asked her, like, how much meat did you guys eat? She's like, how much meat? We barely ate meat, like a little piece every now and then. A little piece every now and then. I grew up eating meat twice a day for lunch and for dinner every single day. Right, the sandwich I brought to school and the dinner we had at night, twice a day. Right, the amount of animals we're consuming now is just unprecedented, and unfortunately, the amount of sickness we have in our world today is unprecedented. And there's a connection. I didn't make the connection. Experts in health have made the connection. And again, it doesn't mean just because you eat animals, you're going to get sick. But if most of what you're eating is coming from animals, right? And that's not to talk about all the pesticides and the herbicides and the growth hormones that they're putting into all the animals. How do all these animals grow so quickly and so plump? It's not normal. It's not natural. They're pumping these animals with all kinds of hormones that then we ingest when we eat them. Not me, but people who do. That's not healthy. Right, so there's lots of health reasons from a Jewish perspective also to favor a plant-based diet, right? These are new times and they require new ways.
Any other questions or any comment? Yes, sir.
Sorry, I had to step out.
No problem.
I did have one question, and which you guys may have already covered, and that is there a ratio that makes sense in terms of, a little bit of animals and mostly, or is the whole, in other words, I think you said before, one cow burger is equal to 10,
Right,
like vegan burgers.
right.
So does that mean that it would be acceptable to have for every 10 burgers that you can have one cow burger? Or in general, is the philosophy just, forget about any animals and just go all vegan?
Rabbi?
Again, an important question. Look, we looked at this from different perspectives. From the perspective of resource use, yes, reducing the amount of animals you eat today is absolutely a good thing, right? Without going full on vegan, just even reducing the amount of meat, chicken, eggs, dairy, fish that you eat will be an improvement on this world, both for the animals, of course, but also for the environment and also your health, right? So reducing the amount is absolutely a beneficial thing. When you look at it from the animal welfare, perspective, it's also a huge, step forward, reducing the amount. But it does mean that even the amount that you do eat did cause, a lot of pain and suffering to some animals. Less animals, which is great, but still some. So again, just all that together, it's an important point to make that, it doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't have to be overnight. It doesn't have to, like, as a vegan, right? I'm in favor of everyone going vegan, of course. But if somebody says I'm cutting out half of the animal products I'm eating, that's amazing. That's amazing for them, for the animals, for the environment, right? Anything we can do, any time that we can make a choice that is more compassionate and more thoughtful and more sustainable for the world, the better. Right? We're not perfect. None of us are perfect. Even vegans are not perfect. Believe it or not, right? Even Jewish vegans are not perfect. But really, anything we can do. It's about the journey. It's about the process. It's about being thoughtful and aware, sensitive and conscious and compassionate as much as we can. So anything that we can do, is gonna make this world a better place.
Good. Anything else? If not, thank you, Rabbi Akiva. Yeah,
I applaud all of you.
yes. Gmar Chatima Tova, thank you very much. And we're gonna step away. You're gonna go sleep. We're gonna go have some food. And thank you very much, and we'll be in touch.
Enjoy. Shana Tova, everybody. It was great meeting with you.
Thank you.
All the best. Shana Tova. Shalom, shalom. Gmar Chatima Tova.
Yep, thank you.
Amen, amen, amen. Amen, amen. Toda.
Toda.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Let's see, how are they? There you go. Good. Excellent. Thank you, guys. Let's eat.
What is food?
Yeah, we got food. Okay.
I was vegetarian for a while.
כן, כן, שמעתי אותי.
Almost 40.
הלך לכל מיני סיגה, דיבר yeah, it was very nice.
Why not?
יופי, תודה רבה שבאתם. Let me disconnect this thing.
You never told me that, though, that I'm sure I told her.